Hello and welcome to the Happy Families podcast, where you get real parenting solutions every single day. Yesterday, it was just a wonderful interview conversation with Professor Nicholas Epley from the University of Chicago, talking about being a little more social and the well-being benefits that come from that, plus the gap in our expectations around, we think that interactions aren't going to be fun. They tend to be amazingly fun. Well, maybe I'm overstating it, but certainly we enjoy interactions, even with random people, more than we thought. Today, we're going to go deeper into what that means from a parenting point of view and how we can deepen relationships that already matter to us. Stay with us. It's a Doctor's Desk episode of the Happy Families podcast today. I'm Dr. Justin Coulson. Every Thursday, we get into the parenting science, and I couldn't resist. My conversation yesterday with Dr. Nicholas Epley was so good about his brand new book, A Little More Social, that I asked him to stay on and continue the conversation. Nick, thanks for continuing this. I want to start today's conversation by not talking about relationships, but by actually talking a bit about your personal history. Yesterday, you mentioned you're a father of five, but your family has a unique makeup, and there's a somewhat painful but also beautiful story behind it. Would you just talk a little bit about how your parenting story evolved, specifically in relation to the pain of loss and the blessing of adoption?
So we have five children. Three of them actually are adopted, and we lost a baby along the way as well. And the research that I've been involved with over the years has affected my life in many ways. I mean, nothing has changed the way I live my life more than this, in small ways, but also in big ways, such as when pain struck our family. It got me thinking a lot about our work. This was in 2016. We learned we were pregnant. Again, my wife was pregnant, and we already had four children. And at 3 months, we learned that our daughter had Down syndrome. We were not ready for this. We were not expecting this, and really kind of taken aback. We started calling lots of people who were raising kids with Down syndrome. We didn't know what this was like. Every parent we talked to, like almost like they were reading off of a script, used the word blessing to describe the impact that their kid had on their family and in their lives. And so we were getting ready. We were excited to go on this new adventure with our daughter, who we'd already named Sophie by this point. And then at 6 months, July 11th, 2016, we lost her. 6 months into my wife's pregnancy, we had a stillbirth. It was painful. It's the worst thing that's ever happened to us. Surely there are parents listening to this here who have gone through this kind of loss and get it. We struggled with that for a solid year. We were just kind of in a funk. We just couldn't do stuff. We just were in a funk. And I remember one morning I went into our sunroom, which is down on the main floor of our house, and Jen was there drinking coffee, and I asked her, would you consider adopting a child again? We were ready to go. We were ready to raise a child. There's still children who need parents. We were ready. We could do this again. We'd already done it twice. Would you be interested in doing this? And without missing a beat, she said, would you be willing to consider adopting a child with Down syndrome? And my mind was not there at that moment. I went all the way back, a little over a year, to the 3-month period when we initially got that diagnosis. All this anxiety was again kind of welling up in me. How would we handle this? Would we really be able to do this now? If we adopted, how well would this child be able to connect with us? Adopting brings all kinds of additional anxieties, even beyond the normal parenting anxieties. And I kind of had this realization in that moment that I was kind of a participant in my own experiment. I had at that point seen tens of thousands of data points of people underestimating how positively things would go when they reached out to connect with another person. And here I was, I thought, doing the very same kind of thing with all of these fears. How are we going to be able to handle this? How will she respond to us? Will we really be able to create this kind of bond that you need with a child? And I decided that I was doing the same thing that our participants were. It gave me some data-driven courage, right? To realize that those fears that I had were probably off. And here Jen was willing to do this. We had the resources. We'd be able to do this. Our marriage was strong. We thought in the long run, this would work out well, and that these fears were just short-term concerns that were likely misplaced that I had. And so I said, yeah, we can do this. And it was about a year later after that we boarded a flight, all of us, whole family, Jen and I and our 4 kids at the time, and boarded a flight to go to China to meet our daughter, Lindsay, who was 2 at the time, with just a wonderful smile, despite a really, really, really hard start in life. I remember actually the first time we met her, she had her cheeks were all red, just rubbed raw because she'd been crying for a long time before we actually got to her in the days leading up to it, I'm sure. But she still had this amazing smile, and she's been a blessing, just like all the parents who we talked to said she would be. She's amazing. She's amazing.
Thanks for sharing that. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's bring this back to research around relationships and connection.
Mm-hmm.
Your book is called A Little More Social, and I have this belief that one of the most valuable things that a child can hear in a school setting when they walk through those school gates are the words, "Hey, come sit with us. Come sit with us."
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's the be all and end all in terms of they're going to just do so well at school if they've got people who are excited to see them. In our conversation yesterday, we talked about connection with people that we don't know. Our expectation, talking to a stranger, is that it's not going to go well. It generally does go very well because people are ultra social. And we walk away from those experiences feeling elevated, feeling positive, feeling glad that we had that discussion. For all of us, adults and children, when we're involved in longer term relationships, that ride can be pretty bumpy. Sometimes the relationships feel great, other times they don't feel so well. And I'm thinking specifically about children, maybe even a little bit like Lindsay, who sometimes feel like they're on the outer. There are kids with all kinds of diagnoses, all sorts of challenges. There are some children who are just not that social. They're not the life of the party. They're not the social butterfly. And they walk into the school gates and nobody says, come sit with us. What I'm curious to know is, with all of your research into mind reading, understanding the way people think, understanding social relationships, if I'm a parent who knows that my child is not hearing those words, what can I do to support them?
That's a tough one. So our daughter, Lindsay, doesn't always hear those words either, even though I have to say, I think she may be the most popular kid in school because she has no filter on her. Hello. Right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty good. Again, I think, to go back to our conversation yesterday where I talked about the importance of modeling, I think that might be an important thing to do, to just show our kids how they can empower themselves to reach out and connect, and how far a hello will go, how much, even inviting themselves to come and sit down with somebody else who might be sitting by themselves, right? How much power they have to actually connect if they try. I think that's the advice that I would give. Once they try it, once they reach out and start engaging, it becomes a habit. Kids can have a lot of power to connect with other people. They don't have to wait to be invited. They could find somebody and try to connect themselves. I guess that's what I would do. I mean, the other thing that, of course, parents can do is help to structure some of these things as well. We do that a lot with Lindsay. So we have a trampoline in the backyard that Lindsay loves to death, and so do all of the neighbor kids. And we invite all the neighbor kids over to play with Lindsay, to just help to structure some of those interactions, just to make them get going. So that's another thing that sometimes parents can do to help their kids connect, to structure some of those connections.
After the break, we're going to talk about what to do when social interactions are a little less fulfilling than we would like. Sometimes the gap isn't a gap at all. Sometimes we predict that it's not going to be great, and it isn't great. And other times we hope that it's going to be great, and it isn't great. Plus, recognizing easy opportunities routinely. Nick Epley's #1 go-to for finding great connections. Stay with us. We're back. It's the Happy Families podcast with Professor Nicholas Epley from the University of Chicago, talking about his book, A Little More Social. Nick, social life's tricky, maybe even prickly at times. I went to a function just recently where I was going to be with a whole lot of people that I know and enjoy being with. And yet for 3 hours, as I mingled at the function, I found myself feeling more and more hollowed out and less interested in what was going on. I wonder if you have any sense of why it is that sometimes when we're with people that we really like to connect with, we just feel a little disconnected. What's going on in our minds and that mind reading process that you were talking about when this happens?
I think a lot of those situations are cases where you can't actually have a conversation that connects you very well with the person. So this often happens at parties where you got a whole bunch of people together and you're all mingling around, but none of those opportunities are like one-on-one. They're one with a group of people, and you can't ever really talk to anybody. Actually, that's probably what's happening in lots of these cases, the cocktail party or the networking function where you never really get a meaningful conversation with somebody. And so I think my suggestion in a case like that, if you're not having the kinds of conversations you would want, would be to try to engineer them a little bit, try to get away from the crowd and more of a one-on-one situation where you can actually have a meaningful conversation with somebody, and then ask questions that you actually are interested in. You can ask people something meaningful rather than just sticking to small talk or chit chat. We find in our work that when you do, in fact, go a little deeper in your conversation than you would otherwise, those conversations turn out to be also surprisingly pleasant. They tend to go better than people expect they will as well. So you can take control of some of those conversations.
I love your insights, Professor Epley, and you've been wonderfully generous with your time. Let's wrap up with one final question. In the book, you talk about how porcupines don't stab each other even when they're close. You talk about cows as examples of how we can be a little more social. And people need to read the book to understand how all of that works. But ultimately, you say that to be a little more social, whether it's for us or for our children, whether we're modeling it or just doing it ourselves because it makes our life richer, we need to recognize easy opportunities routinely.
Mm-hmm.
And each of those words is a standalone element of how to be a little more social. Would you spend just a couple of minutes talking about how we recognize easy opportunities routinely?
Yeah, the recognize part comes from noticing, just bothering to notice all of the conversations and interactions you're not having. So you could do this, just think about yesterday, right? Think about what you're doing at each hour of the day, right? And think about how many opportunities you might have had in each hour to reach out and engage with somebody that you didn't take, right? This could be a conversation, but it could be passing along a compliment. It could be reaching out and expressing gratitude to somebody. It could be picking up the phone and calling an old friend. Once you start looking for opportunities, or once you start looking for places where you're making the choice to not engage with somebody, you start to see the places in your life where you might actually be able to enrich your life a little bit more by taking some of those opportunities that you're already missing. Second is easy. This doesn't have to be super hard, right? If you're learning to exercise a little more, we don't send you out running a marathon on your first day, right? So, where are the spots that are easy for you to engage with somebody? I ride the train in on my commute. That's an easy spot for me. I walk into my office every day. I can smile and say hello to people on that walk in. I don't have to spend any extra time, and I make that moment a little more social. I can walk from my office to the train on the way home, looking for people to compliment on my way. I can go on a compliment walk on the way home, and it lifts me up, right? All of these things are easy to do. Easy things get done. Look for the easy opportunities to connect first. Third is opportunity. Often our assessment, our sense of where our opportunities arise are overly narrow, right? That we fail to appreciate how lots of activities could become a little more social if we added a social element to it. So you walk down to get a coffee at work, right? Well, you could bring somebody with you. You're watching a sporting event, right? You could invite somebody to come over and watch it alongside you. You're driving home at the end of the day, maybe from work. That's an opportunity to pick up the phone and maybe call a parent or a kid or an old friend. Opportunity often means adding something social to something maybe you're doing that could be more social if you just tried. And then routinely, none of this is going to matter unless you treat mental health in the same way we treat exercise, which is a routine habit that you have to do over and over again. Happiness, it turns out, is kind of like a leaky tire, right? You do something, you feel good, and then it dissipates. Nothing lasts. Nothing lasts, right? We adapt to almost everything. And that means that if we're going to uplift our lives a little bit more often, if we're going to uplift our lives sustainably, it means we have to look for moments routinely to lift ourselves up.
It's so simple. It's so simple.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
and the ripple effect is far-reaching. I'm grateful for your book. I'm grateful for the impact that it had on my life. And as I said to you, this is one of those books that actually does have an impact in the way we live. So, Professor Nicholas Epley, it's been a wonderful and generous conversation. You've been very kind with your time. Thanks for chatting.
Thank you so much, Justin. This has been great.
Professor Epley works at the University of Chicago, and his book is a little more social. You've got to get it. We'll link to it in the show notes. You can get it everywhere that you buy books, and it will make a difference in all of your relationships, and even the relationships that you don't have just yet. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rullon from Bridge Media. Mim Hammonds provides our additional support, and if you'd like more info about anything we've talked about, check the show notes or visit happyfamilies.com.au.